He abandoned the one who loved him most, thinking it was his only choice. Years later, when they reunited, even strangers couldn't hold back their tears. On a cold November morning, when the sky hung low and gray, like it might collapse onto the earth, Daniel Hayes stood at the edge of a rest stop just outside the city. Cars rushed past, tires hissing against wet asphalt. In his hands was a worn red leash. On the other end sat a dog who trusted him completely. The dog's name was Cooper. Cooper was a mixed breed, part lab, part something no one could ever quite identify. His fur was uneven in places. His ears never sat the same way, and his tail wagged with a force that suggested optimism was a physical trait. Cooper looked up at Daniel. With eyes that had never learned suspicion, Daniel clipped the leash to a metal post near a bench. He told himself it would only be for a minute. Daniel knelt, pressing his forehead against Cooper's. "Stay," he whispered, his voice breaking in a way he hadn't expected. Cooper licked his chin, tail thumping against the bench. He thought this was a game. He always thought things were games. Daniel stood, turned, and walked away. He didn't look back, because if he did, he knew he wouldn't leave. Daniel told himself 100 lies that day, that he had no choice, that Cooper would be found quickly, that someone better would take him in. The truth was simpler and more painful. Daniel was drowning, and he let go of the one thing that loved him without conditions. 6 months earlier, Daniel had lost his job. 3 months after that, his apartment, debt stacked up like bricks on his chest. He slept in his car for weeks. Cooper curled tightly beside him, sharing warmth, sharing silence, sharing loyalty. But winter was coming. Shelters were full. Friends stopped answering calls, and the car was barely running. The morning Daniel left Cooper, he drove until his hands shook on the steering wheel. He screamed alone in the car, pounding the dashboard until his knuckles split. Then he drove on, carrying a guilt that would follow him into every version of his future. Cooper waited. At first, he sat politely, leash slack. He watched every passing car. Each one could be Daniel. Every footstep made his ears perk. Minutes became hours. Rain came softly at first, then harder. Cooper shifted, but stayed close to the post. Daniel had said stay, and Cooper had never disobeyed him before. By nightfall, Cooper whimpered. A woman eventually noticed him. While stopping for gas, she crouched, reading the empty tag on his collar, her face tightening with understanding. Animal control arrived. Cooper resisted, paws planted into the ground, pulling toward the road. He spent that night in a concrete kennel, shivering, eyes fixed on the door. Daniel never came. Years passed. Daniel rebuilt his life, the way people do when they have no other option. Slowly, painfully, unevenly. A warehouse job, then a better one. Eventually, a small apartment, the kind with thin walls, and no balcony. But peace never fully came. Every dog he passed on the street felt like punishment. Every bark sounded like an accusation. At night, Daniel dreamed of Cooper, tied to that post, rain soaking his fur, eyes searching the dark. He never adopted another dog. It felt like betrayal. And yet, some part of him believed, foolishly, desperately, that Cooper was alive somewhere. That maybe, somehow, he had been forgiven. Cooper's life after abandonment was not kind, but it was not cruel either. After the shelter, he was adopted by an older man named Frank. Frank lived alone, in a quiet town, 2 hours away. He had arthritis, a limp, but his hands were gentle, and his voice carried patience. Cooper adjusted. New routines, new streets, a new couch by the window, but some habits never left. Whenever a car slowed near the house, Cooper stood. Whenever a door opened, he ran. Whenever footsteps faded, he waited longer than necessary. Frank noticed. He left you, didn't he? Frank once murmured, rubbing Cooper's head. Cooper rested his chin on Frank's knee. Eyes soft, but distant. Frank loved Cooper deeply, but life, as it often does, ended before love felt complete. One quiet spring morning, Frank didn't wake up. Cooper lay beside him for hours before help arrived. At 8 years old, Cooper returned to a shelter. Older dogs don't get chosen easily. Days blended together. His muzzle had gone gray. His legs were stiff, but his tail still wagged. When people walked by, even when it didn't stop. One afternoon, a volunteer named Sarah scanned Cooper's old intake records. Something caught her eye. A partial name, a city listed, a note, dog extremely bonded to owner. On impulse, she searched, and she found Daniel. Daniel almost deleted the email. He stared at the subject line for a full minute. Long shot, dog named Cooper. His hands trembled as he read. The shelter made no promises. They couldn't be sure. But the description, the crooked ear, the red leash, the rest stopped. Daniel sat down hard. Breath knocked from his chest. He replied with one word. Yes. The drive to the shelter felt endless. Daniel rehearsed apologies. He knew were useless. He imagined rejection, indifference. Nothing would have hurt more than Cooper not recognizing him. When Daniel walked inside, the smell of disinfectant and barking dogs hit him all at once. Sarah led him quietly down a hallway. Please understand, she said gently. He may not. The kennel door opened. Cooper looked up. For a split second, nothing happened. Then Cooper froze. His body went rigid, as if reality itself had stopped working. And then he cried out. Not a bark, not a whine. A sound pulled from somewhere deep and raw. His legs slipped on the floor. As he lunged forward, his tail wagged so hard, it struck the walls. He pressed himself against the gate, eyes locked on Daniel, as if afraid blinking would make him disappear. Daniel fell to his knees. I'm here, he sobbed. I'm here. I'm so sorry. When the gate opened, Cooper ran into him with everything he had left. He licked Daniel's face, his hands, his tears. He circled him, checked him, leaned his full weight into Daniel's chest. Years of waiting collapsed into seconds. The room was silent, except for Daniel's crying and Cooper's frantic breathing. Even the staff turned away, wiping their eyes. Bringing Cooper home was not the end of pain. His body was slower. Vet visits were frequent. Stairs were hard. Nights sometimes came, with confusion. But Cooper slept peacefully, for the first time in years. Always near Daniel, always touching him. Daniel rearranged his life around Cooper's needs, without resentment. Morning walks were slower. Meals were careful. Love was deliberate. They had 2 more years together. 2 years of quiet redemption. On Cooper's last day, sunlight streamed through the apartment window. Daniel lay on the floor beside him, hand resting on Cooper's chest. I never stopped loving you, Daniel whispered. Cooper looked at him with tired eyes. His tail gave one final wag. He was not alone. He was home. Sometimes love waits. Sometimes forgiveness arrives. On 4 legs, gray-faced and loyal. And sometimes, even after abandonment, the heart remembers exactly where it belongs. This story reminds us that love and loyalty can endure even the toughest trials. That sometimes forgiveness comes when we least expect it, and it's never too late to make things right. Never forget those who love you without condition, because true bonds are priceless, and some hearts never stop waiting. If this story touched your soul, please like, share, and comment below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that touch the heart. Thank you for watching and for being part of this journey with us.